All yours.
Cheers. Oh, this is going to stress me out now because I'm between you and lunch as well. And there's not much fun goes on in Greater Manchester sometimes. All I would say is what I'm going to try and do is go through what's been the last sort of 4 months, but actually I've worked for GMP for 16 years now, so a lot of what we've been doing online has been a long process, certainly for the last, coming up for probably about 8-9 years. Please be aware that as part of it, I'm going to go into what happened with the Manchester Arena attack, and just be aware it's an ongoing investigation. So you can bear that in mind if you're tweeting anything. And obviously for us, one of the key bits is obviously the victims and the victims' families. So I'll crack on. Yes, turbulent times for everybody, lots of things happening. I wish we had some kind of fun. We do have fun a little bit on a daily basis. We try and do things that get content. We try and do the stories. I have to say, I'm not likening myself to Yoda because that would be scary. But I work with a lot of heroes. And if anybody saw The Detectives last night, which was on BBC Two, which is a documentary looking at our major crime, major investigation team, some of those people who I think were surely playing up to the camera, but they really are heroes on a daily basis with what they do. And we try and find content and we try and engage people, and we've been doing that, as I say, from going back to about 2010. And the key bit for us is, whilst using all this technology, is really around that which is the confidence of the public. If people have got confidence in policing and in the police and in GMP particularly, it means they're going to come forward to us when they need help. And bear in mind, for us, the vast majority of people are never going to have any interaction with the police, well, they hope not, because they only come to us when they need help, and very little interaction unless they need that, or they have a relative that needs that. So for us, the key bit, as I say, is confidence, and can we build confidence? And we try and keep it very friendly, and we try and keep it kind of as behind the scenes as we can, and show things that, you know, what goes on behind the scenes. Part of the reason we did the Detectives programme is to show that officers are real people, generally most of them, not all of them. And if you've ever come across some traffic officers, apologies if anybody's got them in their families, they aren't real people. I've got lots of stories about traffic officers if you want those later. But one of the key bits for us, as I say, is if people have got confidence, then, you know, throughout the year, they will come to us, they'll give us information, they'll come to us when they need help, and that's all important. But most important as well is when something happens, when we've got a crisis, when something happens that's of that sort of nature, then they'll know they'll feel comfortable to come to us for information and use us as a point of the most up-to-date and accurate information. So, I mean, going back some years, it was a lot easier because it was very straightforward. An incident would happen, the organisation, and we would say, yes, something's happened. We'd have all the information and we'd be the ones feeding the media, and then updates would be provided when it was appropriate. So it was very linear and very easy to control. I'll explain kind of where we are now. The key bits for that, and I'll come back to this a number of times, the key bits for me with all this is those bullet points that I think were critical in the crisis, but are every day of the week in everything we do online. Speed, and trying to get speed of response and recognising what people are saying and understanding and acknowledging what's going on. We had a hostage type situation yesterday, and it was a key for us was recognising what was going on. People in the area wanted to know what was going on, why was the area cordoned off. So speed's really critical, honesty, and also accuracy, because it's very difficult a lot of the time, particularly when you're under pressure, to be 100% sure that you've got the right information. So it's trying to be honest about what you don't know as much about what you do know, and have a level of understanding about the concerns and issues and what's happening in the area. Continuity, making sure we've got a continued, we've invested, as I say, best part of 7 years or more now to try and make sure we've got that online presence that does have a continuity and consistency across all the platforms. And then the key bit for me, which kind of links back to a previous speaker, which is about remembering the people, because the people are the most critical thing. And I think probably the problems that we all have, and I think definitely we have when we're under pressure and in a crisis, is we forget the people. We understand the process, we do the business, but we forget the important bit, which is about all the people that are involved and affected, and how it plays out for them and what's happening for them. And mood and tone, I think, are probably the most critical things for me, particularly in an emergency situation. because it can be won or lost, I think, if you recognise what the environment's like around you or not. But where we are in emergencies now is it's like that. It's all over the place. Something happens, the first place people will find out about it is on Twitter. That's where everybody goes. Fake news, well, after the incident at the arena, I was on Twitter trying to find out what was going on, what people were saying, before we knew what was happening. And there was already fake photographs within 5 minutes. So the speed of which people can kind of try and put disinformation, fake news and everything else out is staggering, really, I suppose, now. And the demand and the insatiable kind of appetite, and then the media come in at a later date. But it's very much lots of different sources of information, and we've got to try and cut through that and have something that people will go back to what we say in terms of accuracy, honesty, and speed that people will go to, and we can deal with that. Goes without saying, before I ever talk about anything, this was the 22 people who died that night on the 22nd of May. Which is still, feels like it was yesterday. It's about 4 months, we're coming up 4 now. They were the reason we did everything we did in terms of online comms and offline comms and everything else. And they remain at the heart of everything we do. Because their families have been, severely affected. There's lots of people that have been affected by what happened. So for us, them, their families, and also the other people who are injured and are still in hospital recovering, are at the heart of everything we've tried to do. Going on, obviously, everybody talks about the golden hour within policing. It's often like within the first hour, the amount you do and what you can get out and what information you get in can kind of define how things develop, but it's actually a lot less than that. So we have a national protocol for any kind of terrorist incident, which will be that information will come out from the police predominantly in the initial stages on Twitter, because of the speed we can get information out. And actually we tell the media they're not getting anything, they'll have to get it off Twitter as well. Luckily we'd had some of those conversations with them before everything that happened on the 22nd of May. But we'd got the first tweet out within 20 minutes. Which sounds like a long time, but actually isn't really, if you consider that it happened at 10:31. I think the on-call press officer was contacted within 10 minutes and contacted me to say, I'm putting this out. It might be something, it might not. And that was a call. We knew at that point very little other than there'd been something happen. And at the end of it, if it had been nothing, then, I don't think anybody would have particularly criticised us massively, and if we would have accepted it if that had happened. But the key bit for us, again, in that initial stages is preserve and protect life, so it was keep away from the area, because we don't know what was going to happen afterwards. Was there going to be anything? Was there going to be a second device? Was there going to be something else happen? So we had to try and make sure we could keep people away. We recognised the issue. I think that's the other key bit, was very early on we said, yes, there's something happening. And we will keep you updated and we'll provide more information. Within an hour, I was called in. I was in before the first hour. I was in there by about coming up for 20 past, 11:30 at night. And we'd started to plan what we were going to do, what we were going to put out, how much information we could say. And by the time I got in, I'll just move on to it in a second, we'd got the first proper statement out, which had confirmed fatalities. So again, it was trying to move things really quite quickly. And the media spokesperson, who I've been asked a number of times, why did you, and from a lot of police forces, why did you use the chief constable? It was one of those no-brainers. I just never felt like it was going to be anything else. We would never use anybody else, because often you escalate it up the organisation. And in policing, that would be, we'll start with a chief superintendent, and then if we need to, go to the chief. But actually with this, it was such an impact and such a severity that you just knew we had to. And that was the decision that I'm going to say, I don't think we ever really decided it. It just was natural. And within the first 4 hours, we'd actually gone out and done the first on camera. That was the second one, which was at about 7 o'clock in the morning. And the first one was at about 3 o'clock. And the key bit for us, whilst the media, obviously, they're running 24 hours, a lot of them, but we knew lots of people wouldn't be watching that, apart from my mum, who suddenly realised I was called into work and wanted to know where I was. Lots of people have been watching the stuff through the night, but when they got up in the morning, we wanted them to have as much information as possible so they could get in touch with somebody if they needed to, if they had concerns about people who were missing, and knew where to go. So that was the key bit for us. So, like I say, even through the night, we'd kind of worked that through. And that was the very first statement that we managed to get out within an hour that confirmed fatalities, urged people again to avoid the area, and said that we would try and get a casualty bureau number up as soon as we could to help people. All a bit of a blur, really, in a lot of it. And, you know, it's nice to think that we've got lots of plans and we've got an emergency comms plan. But I think at this point in time, we were too busy just doing what we thought we needed to do and dealing with it. Probably because it's ingrained in us, I suppose, for some of it. Part of the way through the week, the first week, we got mutual aid from other forces, and one of the other press officers came in and said, have you got a copy of your emergency comms plan? And we went, no. We'll have to find it. I think it's on the system somewhere. A lot of things, as I say, I think other speakers have said, it's just some things just feel right, and you know it's the right thing to do. Other bit for us was trying to get as much information out as we could in lots of different ways so that people could understand what was going on, but also then could hopefully come forward with information. And that included getting lots of footage out, lots of CCTV. At one point, I think the media was struggling because we were sending out so many bits of footage and CCTV stills that they were actually struggling to kind of understand it. And that was one of our big problems, because from the incident happening on the Monday night, by the Tuesday, we'd gone to a critical threat level nationally, which creates all kinds of issues for police forces to deal with in terms of operational and communication stuff. And then at that time as well, we were making arrests. We made about 20 or so arrests. So we've got a huge kind of a lot of information that we were desperately trying to get out to people and find different ways to do it. One of the things that worked quite well was we did do an infographic. And we did that about 3 or 4 days in because of the issue of trying to get people, including the media, to understand what was going on. One of the problems was, our infographics are usually nice things with a bit like a colourful thing. And I spent the best part of the Saturday morning when we were putting this together with one of the digital team going, you will make it look like dull, won't you? You won't make it look fancy. Because we have the panic about what it would look like. But actually, it got really well used, and there's a huge amount of information. You can probably see it there, but huge amount of information, including a timeline of events, what happened when, and also then statistics around numbers of arrests we had at that time, scenes that we had, and various other things. Again, just trying to keep as much flow of information in a lots of accessible ways. The other thing, the massive piece of work for us as well was supporting victims and victims' families. It was an unprecedented level attack, and the response to it had to kind of match that. So, very first briefing that the families had around what was happening, what was going to happen. I think they met the coroner. We had press officers in there as well, so they were able to talk, to a kind of audience around what was likely to happen and what we could do. Key bit again for us was to try and give them as much support as possible, and that continues. So every time anything happens, the families are the first to know. We do our best to make sure that they're consulted, that they're involved, that they understand if there's something that's going to happen, and it's a real long ongoing process. It was very problematic in the initial few days because of the number of families we were dealing with, and also trying to get information out. There's a very formal identification process, and we ended up having to kind of negotiate with the coroner to go against what is the normal kind of accepted procedure around it, so that we didn't formally identify them, but we could put out family tributes very, very quickly. Which really helped, to say, it built a kind of very strong relationship with the families, which has helped, I think, in dealing with everything that's kind of come since then. And it's important, as I said to us, that the central bit is trying to support the families. And I think the chief constables met vast majority of the families now, personally. So we've invested a lot. I think it's quite different to a lot of major incident responses, in that we get very focused on the process and actually forget to really provide the support to victims, families and victims. With this, we did have lots of family liaison officer support, and that was quite extensive. But we felt, in terms of communication, because of the level of interest, we had to be there and we had to be providing that support, even though it really stripped us out in terms of staffing to be able to deal with it. But the media have really been very good with it. They've been very supportive of families, and they've been very careful to avoid intrusion into some very sensitive times when they did visits to various scenes and things. And that continues, as I say. We've still got inquests that'll happen. We've still got the investigation. We've had lots of documentary requests. And every time anything happens, as I say, we do consider the families and make sure we consider what their requirements are. And then, you know, it's a lot around confidence. So in the first week, we were just dealing with the aftermath of the incident. But then within 2 weeks, if anyone remembers, we had two things. We had the Cortinas, which was quite a large event. But then 2 weeks on, we had the Ariana Grande concert at Old Trafford. And I tell you, whilst everything may have looked lovely, and you've seen the dancing police officers, behind the scenes, everybody was just petrified that something was going to happen again. Because I don't think we could have dealt with it, to be fair, emotionally as much as kind of operationally. But again, it was about maintaining that level of confidence so that people understood what was going on, that there was lots of support there, and to provide kind of that, make sure that we still could deal with that. One of the things we've not been able to do, and you've probably never seen any police officers talk about their accounts from the scene and what they saw when they arrived there, and that's because they don't feel able to. So unlike some of the other emergency services, it was quite a difficult period of time, really, and still is, because we got a request to get involved in the documentary and to speak to one of the officers who was first on scene, and I can't provide them anybody, because we keep talking to them and nobody wants to talk. They're still dealing with a lot of what they faced that night. So there's lots of difficulties, but in terms of the public, what public saw, and in terms of the events, we continue to provide a real positive response. Even though, as I say, we're all working 12, 13-hour shifts, and the vast majority of the officers, I think that you saw probably dancing, weren't from GMP anyway. They were from all around the country who were here on mutual aid. But it carries on, days, weeks, months, this is be years. The city itself, the response, the recovery, it's vast. And my concern, I suppose, for lots of things is all organisations kind of think through that. If something happens to my organisation that's critical, what will we do in the first day? What will we do in the first hour? What will we do in the first week? When really you should be thinking that we should actually do that, but it's longer than that. What should we be doing in 3, 4, 5, 6 months' time? Because there's not a day goes by that what happened on the 22nd of May doesn't impact on what the team do, and doesn't kind of cloud our views and doesn't make us think about doing something differently, and doesn't have a pressure on us as well in terms of the stretch to the team. So it is my kind of, I've got a number of things that I'm absolutely got madly passionate about in the last 4 months, because I think it's absolutely critical, some of which relates to how kind of police comms works, but this is around, you know, anybody who's doing any kind of emergency planning work or kind of critical planning and crisis management for an organisation, think months ahead, and make sure your plan thinks months ahead. Keeping it simple, I say, going back to what we said before and my key bits around all the comms we do, we had a number of things. We had the recovery, we had transport issues because we had Victoria was out of action. We've got loads of reviews and debriefs that are happening. It had an international angle, and if anybody wants this, I've got a Donald Trump related story that happened on day 2, which I keep forgetting because it was like so much was going on that even Donald Trump didn't kind of stick in my brain too much. We had normal business to do as well, as things kind of got back a bit more after the first sort of initial few days. We were having normal business coming through. Staff welfare for us was a massive thing, not just for the officers, but also for my staff and for the team, because of the things they were having to do and things they're having to deal with. And I think sometimes we often forget that from a kind of comms or marketing perspective, that we can get caught up in these things. Families still dealing with that, the coronial process, the investigation, which is still a huge piece of work. People who are injured and affected, rising hate crime and community tension. We had so much that we were dealing with and trying to manage that the key bit in terms of what we put out was to keep it as simple as possible. As say, going back to the infographic, trying to make it understandable for people. Explaining what was going to come, and again, that's been quite problematic because, you know, it's a very movable situation, but we're still trying to keep people to understand what's happening and focus on those affected. Again, going back to the mood and the tone, and understanding the impact on people. and at some point trying to get to a return to normal. But this was like 3 months on. I've got tributes, anniversaries, there's still concerts, and there's a massive, obviously, fundraising campaign. And then there's the long-term effect in terms of having an attack like that happen in an area, and the impact is still kind of quite at forefront of people's minds. And I was taken back by, there's another document, I think Greater Manchester's taken over the television at the minute, because there's also the Harrop Fold School Educating Greater Manchester that's on, and I watched the first one, and it was listening to one of the lads who'd been at the concert and got out and got home and didn't realise what happened until he got home, that kind of brought it back about how this is going on for years, because you've got children that were caught up in what happened and are still going to have to kind of work their way through it, which is why there's a big support in terms of mental health as well that's taking place. And the family support for us, as I say, I think that'll go on probably for many years. So from today, I sound like I feel like I've brought everybody down, but you'll go and get some food now and it'll be fine, is to be prepared and plan for things. And also, and in your tone on a daily basis, you know, and understanding where you are, I think, in a brand space, in an organisation space, and start the conversations now. We've always said this, you know, you can't suddenly start to try and use digital, social media, whatever you're going to do in the middle of something happening, whatever organisation you are. Doesn't matter whether you're dealing with an emergency kind of emergency services sort of crisis, or you're dealing with a brand crisis. You can't start to suddenly go, we'll try this and we'll try that. You need to be trying it out and working on it when you can. Understanding where you are and what your position, I think that links to what other speakers have said about different things. Because, you know, I mean, we can't do joke book gags. We can do some things, you know, but it's understanding where you are and what your brand's about and how you can put that across, and even more so when you're in the middle of something. 24/7, understandable. I think, you know, we need to do that more and more, and I hate automation, so I'm not quite sure how we do that other than try and squeeze even more work out of the staff, the more small team I've got. Plan and test. If you kind of want the real pain, I've got a cold today, so I'm trying to not spread it. But I had a cold. We had one staff member off sick. I had a cold. We was down staff anyway. And on day 2, all our email IT failed across the organisation. So, you know, plan and test, because you never know. It's not going to go straight forward, and you're not suddenly going to have everybody in where you need them to do all the things you need to do. And then the key bit for me, again, around all of this is listening. And I'm sure that's the same for whatever you do in a comms or marketing perspective. Listen to your customers, listen to what your public's saying, listen to what people are saying, and make sense of it and understand it and adapt according to it as you can. Because, again, for me, if you don't do that on a daily basis, let alone when you're in the middle of a crisis, then I think you're going to struggle, and you're potentially going to kind of lose out. So, conscious of time, that's me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amanda. Powerful story. Very powerful story. Very difficult times, and amazing for you to be on the front line dealing with that. It's something else, to say the least. So obviously there's not many questions about the story that you've just told in a lot of respects. But one person has asked the question, under normal circumstances, you know, how much of your efforts are spent reacting to incoming tweets or posts or things that are going on, how much, you know, is focused on actually the ability to the proactive piece that you talked about and talking to the community. Do you find that you have time for that, or is
it probably is about 50-50.
Yeah.
I'd want it to be a bit more towards being more proactive, but for us, actually, a lot of the responding to what people are saying becomes dealing with business. So we can deal with complaints, issues people have got, and get them dealt with much quicker. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it can all be quite positive, really.
Yeah, that's it. Any quick questions out there from Andrew on the floor? Or?
How big's the team? Tiny. I have a team of 33, which sounds like a lot, but I have a lot of other bits of responsibility. So I have responsibility for the Force Museum, which is on Newton Street, if it's down the road, which is lovely, but they're not strict sort of comms people. In terms of the digital team itself, there's 5. They're mainly developers, and the rest of the team, as I say, I've probably got 15 in terms of proactive comms. So it's quite small, really. a lot smaller than the Met.
You've done so well to get through all of this, and then suddenly...
I know, I have done. But really small, very small team. Found out how many comms and marketing people they've got at the University of Manchester. Is anybody there here from there? Confess. If not, I'll tell you later. Because I went, oh, I'm using that one when I get back to the office.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Massive. Oh, another question. Sorry, didn't see that. Yeah. It's a bit of both. There was a couple of things that happened. I mean, a lot of the time it was really helpful. They were sharing the messages. They were encouraging people to follow what we were saying, to understand what was going on. There were some photographs that got circulated. So we had one occasion when a man actually contacted us and said, I've been threatened because I posted a picture on social media, but this was dead people. It was people in the arena. And I went like going, and we'll take it down. You know, so I think the boundaries of what's acceptable for some people means that they'll put themselves into that difficult space. Would some police officers like it to be like it was back in the, whenever? Probably. But actually, I think we realise now that there's so much that can come back from it, and so, so much that can help, that it is that balance. And most of the time, I say, like with that, even the fake news stuff, when that was circulating very, very early on, it was some local journalists and other people that said, no, that's from a photograph from, this exercise back in 2015 or whatever. So we didn't need to. So I think, as I say, it probably balances it out. Okay, cool. Right, massive thank you for Amanda.